From all of us here at Keen Investigations, we hope you're having a great day. And now for the story. Chuck Morgan was the owner of an escrow company. On March 22, 1973, he started his day like any other day, dropping his two daughters off at school, which he did on the way to work. Mysteriously on this day, no one heard from him afterwards. Around 2 a.m. 3 days later, on March 25th, Ruth, Chuck's wife, awoke to their dogs barking. Curiously, she opened the door to find her husband standing on the porch. She immediately noticed that he had plastic zip ties still binding his hands together, and a broken one hanging there on his ankle. He was also missing a shoe. She then noticed that he was frantically pointing at his throat. She asked him if he could talk. Chuck shook his head no. She asked him if he could write. Chuck shook his head yes. Ruth quickly grabbed a pen and paper. After cutting his hands loose with a pair of scissors, a moment went by as Chuck was writing. He handed her the piece of paper he had been writing on. It said that his throat had been painted with an hallucinogenic drug that could cause him to go insane, do severe nerve damage, and possibly kill him. Ruth began to panic, telling him that she was calling the police or at least a doctor. Chuck quickly wrote down that if she did this, that they would kill them all. He then proceeded to write down that she should move his car off the street, writing that they might see it. He did not elaborate on whom they were. Over the next week or so, his wife Ruth nursed him back to health using an eyedropper. Apparently, he could not eat, drink, or swallow properly. While she was doing this, he began to tell her crazy things. He told her that he had been working as a federal agent for the government battling organized crime. He also told her that they had taken his treasury identification. As he got better, he began to be quite paranoid. He started wearing a bulletproof vest everywhere he went. He continued to drive his daughters to and from school, but told the school no one was to ever pick them up besides him. 2 months went by, and then he vanished again. His father claimed that right before his disappearance that Chuck had given him a letter and said if anything was to happen to him, that the letter would explain everything, although no one has ever said what was in this letter. 9 days after he vanished, his wife Ruth received a phone call from a woman that said Chuck is all right, Ecclesiastes 12, 1-8. This is a reference to a Bible passage, which reads in part, "Men are afraid of high places and terrors on the road. Remember him before the silver cord is broken and the golden bowl is crushed. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it." He apparently was not all right, because the next time he would be seen, he was sprawled out near his car in the middle of the desert. He was shot once in the back of the head with his own .357 Magnum, which was found next to him. No fingerprints were found on the gun. There was also a note found with directions to the crime scene written in his own handwriting. Pima County investigators listed things found in the car as assorted ammunition, several weapons, CB radios, and one of Morgan's own dislodged teeth wrapped in a handkerchief. The car was also modified to where it could be unlocked and opened without a key from the underside of the fender. A $2 bill was found pinned to the inside of his underwear. Written on the bill were 7 Spanish names from the letters A to G. Also, Ecclesiastes 12 was written, with the verses 1-8 marked by arrows drawn on the bill's serial number. This was the same reference that the female caller had made to Ruth. On the back of the bill, the signers of the Declaration of Independence were numbered 1-7. Also, a crude map was drawn which showed several roads between Tucson and the Mexican border. These towns were apparently known for smuggling. 2 days after Chuck's death, Pima County investigators received an anonymous phone call from a woman who claimed that Morgan had met her the night before his death at a local motel. She claimed that her nickname was Green Eyes and that she was the same woman that had called Chuck's wife Ruth. She also claimed that at the motel, Chuck had showed her a briefcase containing several $1,000s in cash. He said that the money would allow him to pay off a contract that had been put out on his life. Despite the bizarre evidence, authorities ruled that Morgan committed suicide. His family and a reporter named Don Deverox believed that he was murdered. 3 weeks after Chuck's death, 2 men claiming to be FBI agents arrived at the Morgan home. They told Ruth that they were there to search the place. The men apparently searched the entire house, wrecking the place and terrifying Chuck's wife in the process, before finally leaving without a word. It is unknown if they found anything or even if they were FBI agents. When Don Deverox, the reporter, contacted the FBI, they claimed that they had never even heard of Chuck Morgan. There are several rumors surrounding this case, including that Chuck was killed because he was involved with illegal activities or was doing secret work for the government. Although Chuck claimed that he was working against organized crime, many believe that he was actually involved with it. During the 70s, there was a lot of organized crime in Tucson along with the other cities in Arizona. What made Arizona most attractive to crime syndicates was a unique state law that allowed them to buy land through numbered blind trust accounts. This would allow them to remain anonymous and successfully launder money. Chuck did real estate escrow work for at least one mafia family. They may have used him to do escrow work for the purchases of gold bullion and platinum. This was a more convenient way for them to launder money. Starting in 1973, it appears that he was doing several $1 million of escrow work in bullion and platinum. In reality, there was no bullion or platinum. Instead, the money was moved through several escrow accounts. This was how the money was laundered. The reporter Don Deverox continued to investigate the case for many years. On February 7, 1990, the case was aired on the popular TV series Unsolved Mysteries. After the case was aired, Unsolved Mysteries received several phone calls relating to Chuck's death. Don Deverox investigated several leads that came up as the result of the TV program. He learned that Chuck was heavily involved in the money laundering activities through his Tucson escrow company. From 1973 to his death in 1977, he was also involved in a large gold and platinum transaction. He apparently received a large amount of money from these activities. Deverox discovered that Chuck kept duplicate records of the illicit transactions. Deverox now believes that Chuck was killed because he still had these records. 3 months after the TV show aired, another murder occurred. A man named Doug Johnson was found shot to death in his car across the street from Don Deverox's office. The time of Doug's death is believed to be in the evening, so Don Deverox believes that it was supposed to be him that was murdered. But since it was dark, and Doug Johnson drove a very similar car, the killer made a mistake and thought Doug was Don. A year went by since Doug's death. Don was contacted by a writer in D.C., a Danny Castellero. Mr. Castellero had uncovered an illegal gold transaction that Chuck had been involved in, and wanted to share this information. However, Mr. Castellero was found a few days later in his hotel room in his bathtub with his wrist cut 8 times in Martinsburg, West Virginia. Although his death was ruled a suicide, many believe that Mr. Castellero was not killed because of the information that he had on Chuck, but he was killed due to a story he was working on at that time that had to do with the government and the Iran hostage crisis. Questions continue to orbit the case to this day. What happened to Chuck Morgan during the time of his first disappearance? And what was the explanation for his odd behavior afterwards? Why did he disappear again? Was Chuck Morgan really some sort of a secret agent working for the government? Or was he in fact working for the mafia? All 3 deaths are still unsolved. Keen Investigations will be doing a live stream this Halloween night. Come join us at the links listed below.